Okay, this is Basis 160, and a long time ago at the International UFO Congress, I was honoured to interview Mary Joyce. And that was a while ago, and you were giving a talk about bases in North Carolina.
That's correct. At that time, it was more than that, but at that time, I knew about one of the bases here in North Carolina mountains. And since then, it's been a long time, I have done research and a book on five of them. And the ones that I really would like to share with people today are the ones that have been most recently built because we had witnesses who were there during the construction part of it, which was not the case for the other three. The other three already existed, but the most recent are just being, rather recently built. And so that's where I'd really like to take this.
Well, let's can we do a little bit of a roundup of what you said all those years ago about 2010?
Right. Everything I've written about is in North Carolina mountains. And the one that I knew about back in 2010 when I met you was something that's called the Perry facility. Perry is an acronym. It's PARI. It stands for Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute. And back during the Cold War, it was a Department of Defense operation where they were monitoring satellites and all sorts of different things that were going on. Supposedly, that has been turned over to an astronomical research institute, and it's not in any way connected with the Department of Defense. I don't think that's true at all. I've interviewed a number of people who are very aware that there is a uh, at least 6 stories deep beneath that facility to this day. And what really blows a hole in their cover story is sometimes you can drive by the gate there and you will see somebody dressed in like a SWAT outfit and you can't get in. Other times you can just drive right through the gate and there's not a problem. UFOs are seen flying very low around there. There's a small lake to the west of that facility, and UFOs have been seen flying into that. And I don't know if they've seen people fly out of there, but they've seen them fly into it. Makes you wonder if that is one way of accessing the underground facility. Um, my original witness on this was a woman who grew up in a highly classified community where her father had a very secretive job. Everybody in that community was sort of held under the gun, and they would have regular meetings telling them, you can't talk about this, blah, 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 blah. And those who violated it suddenly had heart attacks or suddenly had something go terribly wrong with them. So people were very, very afraid to speak. The woman who told me this story uh, used to come into where I worked, and she and her husband would kind of tiptoe around the subject of UFOs, and we would talk. And this happened over quite a bit of time. And finally, I said, well, why don't I interview you? Because the website that I do is called skyshipsovercachers.com. We started out just interested in UFOs. We've gone beyond that. But anyhow, I met them at their camper trailer in the Smoky Mountains National Park. And that is not the reason they wanted to talk to me. She had knowledge about this underground base, and she wanted to make sure that she could trust me, and she felt the information needed to get out there. So she's the first one who told me about the underground base. Since then, I have found people who have collaborated with her information. But that was how it all started with the Perry facility.
Well, I think we're sort of sharing the same thing. Somebody just finds somebody within the community, the civilian community, to tell them a story, and that's a way of leaking things out. I talked to John Lear once, and well, I've talked to him quite a lot, the late John Lear, and it was explained to him. Yes, but I mean, John was saying, "Look, I'm telling everybody these secrets, on coast to coast and things like that." And then the response was, "Yes, yes, John, but who's going to believe you?"
Right.
So that was a way of releasing things, and I think we're having that situation right now, where certain people in the community are told this, and that tells a certain audience, a certain perceptive demographic about things. But then it primes the opportunity for somebody bigger, could be the president, could be another country. I think some observers have suggested the Chinese could be talking about this, but we are talking. So let's get on with what's happening right now. Tell us all
Well,
about it.
the most recent facility is under the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and I'll just refer it to as Smoky Park because that's too much to say at one time. Um, Anyhow, again, it came through somebody that I knew before any of this happened. And so he trusted me and I trusted him. And when he began to see strange things happening over Cherokee, which is the Indian reservation right where the Great Smoky Mountains is, so it all is kind of blobbed together. And he and his wife, both of whom had served in the military, they were at a pull-off just south of Cherokee, uh, uh, near a major highway, and they were going into a convenience store, and they saw this vehicle parked out in front. And I think you have a picture of it. It is actually a decontamination. Um, yeah, I
Yeah.
guess you're looking
Uh,
for it.
okay, I'll put this up.
Okay,
So that is that the correct one?
that's it. That's it. And the guy who was in the military said that looks like a decontamination chamber. So that really caught his attention, and they stuck around there and they talked to the driver. This guy is naturally friendly and outgoing, and it was a woman driver. She said she was sitting there waiting for five more, I believe it was five more vehicles to arrive, and then they were all going to go to a certain location. So the couple waited, and the other vehicles arrived. They all had U.S. Air Force tarps over them. They were accompanied by a number of white, like a Jeep or SUV. And inside these escort vehicles, there were men dressed in black with um, obvious guns. So this couple just kind of uh, stayed in the background, but they followed this caravan that was headed to Newfound Gap. And the whole caravan turned into a campground called Smoke Mount, which is just north of the visitor center on the side of the North Carolina side of the Smoky Mountain National Park. Those vehicles all pulled in there, and as soon as they pulled in, the gate was put down so nobody else could enter. So that was the first thing. But this story really, really evolved. I got reports of people out in their recreational vehicles going back into the back part of the park, and they would run into, quote, park rangers who just happened to have machine guns with them. Um, I have pictures of it in my book. They like AR-15s or something like that, but they
Could
all
you
look the
mention the
same.
book?
Yes, the book is Underground Military Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains. And after I got all this information, and I clearly saw that nobody else was writing about underground facilities in this part of the country. There's quite a bit that's been written about things in the west, to the west of the Mississippi River. And when I found out nobody was getting this information out, that's when I decided to write the book. In other words, I didn't write the book just because I wanted to write a book.
What about those?
That's a different story, so save that till
Okay,
later.
fine. That's fine. I just wanted it wasn't on the presentation, so I'll go back to this. Okay, no worries.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's with the second facility I'll talk about. But all of this was happening in 2012, 2013. Um, some of the stories get quite interesting.
Well,
There
I'm
is,
we're here. We have limited time. No, unlimited time. So go into each individual thing as much as we can. If necessary, we'll do another interview. Okay.
all right, there were two men who ran the fish hatchery for the Cherokee Indian Reservation. And they were very concerned because the flow of the river into the fish hatchery was drying up. So there's like a little road along the side of this creek or river, and they were thinking that maybe there were beaver that were blocking the river. They went up, there were no beavers. When they got to the very top where there's a reservoir, the reservoir, which has always been filled, was empty. And there, smack in the middle of it, was a 50,000 gallon water tank. Um, and there were pipes going from that water tank down into the ground. Very, very suspicious. Those two men, for reasons that were never given to them, lost their jobs after that. But that is one of the kinds of stories that really, perks up your ears. Something really is going on. We got multiple reports from people who could actually hear underground activity going on. They would hear, several of them described it as the sound of pounding a pylon for a bridge into the ground. They
Right.
would hear that. They would hear mechanical sounds. Um, the part of the park that all this was happening in is not where the normal tourists would go. And if anybody wants to find it on a map, it's near the Mile High campground in the Cherokee Indian or in the Smoky Park. Let's see what else.
Is
Oh
it
yeah,
available on Google Maps or Google?
oh yeah,
I mean,
you'd be able to find it. Um, anyhow, let's see. There's so much that's happened.
well,
Um,
just take your time.
People who have been there have experienced strange sensations. One witness, who again had been in the military at one time, said that it was a beautiful day. And when she was driving up there along the Blue Ridge Parkway, the birds were singing, the sun was out, everything was beautiful. The closer she got to where that underground facility is, the stranger it got. And she began to feel nauseated.
What
And
kind
she
of
stayed.
strangeness can you describe that?
uh, the strength, first of all, the nausea, she began to notice that. Second, she noticed there suddenly were no bird sounds in an area where there's normally a lot of birds. um, she got she got to a point where the road was blocked. She climbed over it, and she went down the road further. She could see no reason why the road would be blocked. Nothing had fallen, there were no trees, nothing blocking the road. And again, she began to hear this pounding sound beneath the ground, the grounding signs or sounds beneath the ground. Um, so I call it people repellent because at a number of sites, when you get close to them, people get this strange feeling in their head. It makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you want to, just get away from wherever you are. I've experienced that myself at the Perry location. And each time I've gone up there, I've had other people in the car with me. And the closer we got to the facility, the more this weird feeling in your head would happen. And we'd turn around and
Would
start to
that
go,
be like
wait a
the
minute,
kind of thing
stop.
that they use to keep insects or pests out of the garden? It's some kind of hypersonic signal, and then you just don't want to be there anymore.
I think it's some kind of electromagnetic pulse that's sent out. I absolutely do. So, for a fact, I've heard about it at the Smoky Park, and I've heard about it at the Perry facility, and that's the place where I experienced it myself. So, it's very real.
Okay, well, keep going.
Just keep on rattling on, huh?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I do long format, so I want to get into the details. So this is something which people can really understand.
Okay. We'll go back to, let me scroll here. Let me get something here that'll help us a bit.
Do burrow down and keep talking.
Okay. After I got the main story from these three people who have all had military background before, I began to get indirect support for it. For example, somebody was in the Cherokee chief's office, like in the waiting area, and he heard them talking with somebody, I believe, from the federal government, who said that if there's ever an emergency, we will take you and your family to an underground, facility. Well, that made that person perk up their ears, and so that was a story I got later. I got stories later about people going in their recreational vehicles back on the back roads of the park, and they would be stopped by the rangers in with the machine guns, and just told to turn around. Park rangers shouldn't have machine guns, and there's no place in the park that should be inaccessible. So that's highly suspicious. Um, the main couple that started me on all of this, I call him Clark. That's not his real name, but Clark and his family were at the Cherokee fairgrounds, and five, no, it was six large cargo planes flew over, coming from a low elevation and flying up. all of them were in the process of closing their um, cargo doors. So six of these fly over, all of them, their cargo doors are still partially open. They obviously had done a drop over this area that we're talking about. Clark was able to get a picture of one of those before they all disappeared. I don't know if you have a picture of that one or not. He said it was bigger than a C-130. There it is. There's one of them. And there were six of them in a row that had done apparently a major drop over this location. He got pictures of Osprey. That picture's another story. Um, there's your Osprey. He also
You're
saw,
talking to this about this?
I'm talking about that. That's an Osprey.
We've had two of those fly over here. And I'm in England, in
And
Wiltshire, but we have a lot of military bases here,
right. So you're familiar with them. And
especially when they fly just across the back.
he wasn't able to get a picture of it, but he did see, I don't know what it's called now. It's some kind of a vehicle, a plane that carries big cargo and will do drops of large containers like the size of railroad cars. He also saw planes flying
Would that be
low
a
and
jet? There's jets and there's turboprops. A big turboprop plane. There's another one which is got it's like a Hercules, but it's got like a high tail at the back, like the old Vickers that's a new Boeing version. And that's a big cargo carrier.
right. He didn't at that time. He didn't know what it was. He just said it was bigger than a C-130, which he was familiar with. So they were six of these pretty good-sized vehicles flying right out of the area where this place is. Smaller planes were flying over and dropping smaller packages in that same area. So almost everything for this base is being supplied by air, not by the roads. The closest road that we're aware of is something with an Indian name. It's called Hintuga Road, and that's they closed that for a while. They said it was because there was a washout. These witnesses said there was never a washout. And the man suspected that heavy equipment had been on that road and torn it up. And so it was later totally repaired under the guise that it had been washed out. There had been no washout. In
What
fact,
sort
that
of time
reservoir,
period are we talking about here? Because we've had these situations in Ireland where bases are built, and
uh,
everybody sees the equipment being driven in through the village, and they take pictures of them, and then they put them on their Facebook pages or whatever, and later all of that stuff disappears.
2012, 2013 would be the time frame on this. And there have been people that live in Cherokee or live nearby who have felt a rumbling or explosions or something that feels like an earthquake. When they go and check, there's been no earthquake recorded by the Geological Survey or whatever that is called. And like explosions. So there's been probably great expansion of the underground caves in this area. I have found that the caves seem to be a unifying thing because the underground facilities can expand on these existing caverns, and it makes it easier to build these underground facilities. As a sideline, the Bigfoot are in this area, they live in caves. The little people are in this area, they live in caves. So caves seem to be a very important part of all three of these
Now, you
subjects.
mentioned two types of indigenous beings, Bigfoot and the other ones.
And they're called Cherokee Little People.
Now, when you say little people, I'm thinking in Ireland they call them leprechauns or something, or the Fae, or the She.
They are about 3.5 feet tall. They look very much like the Cherokee people themselves, but they're not really midgets, and they don't have that sound in their voice like a midget, and they're not dwarfs. They're a unique race of people. And they were here before the Cherokee. The Cherokee originally came from the region of the Great Lakes and then migrated toward the mountains. And when they arrived, they saw these little gardens, but there were no people. And finally, they saw some of these little people come up from beneath the ground to collect their vegetables. And they began to call them the moon people because the little people came out at night. And so that was the original name that the Cherokee called the little people at the very, very beginning.
I'm
But
very
we,
interested. Could you tell us everything you know on that? That's fascinating.
yeah, I've done a whole book on that one. That was one of the first books I did. And it was called Cherokee Little People Were Real. And I just dove into that in a really big way.
Is that still
There,
available?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Cherokee Little People Were Real, again on Amazon. And I was very fortunate. All these stories open up because you just happen to connect with somebody who's willing to share information with you. And when I first moved to the mountains, I began to hear these stories about the little people. I thought they were like ways of teaching people or just allegorical stories. I didn't think they were real. And I got into a conversation with an elderly man who was well respected in this area. He was a World War II hero. He had been a pastor for one of these mountain churches for more than 40 years. And he said they were absolutely real. And when he was a young man after World War II, he was involved in construction at Western Carolina University, which again is about 20, yeah, about 20 minutes from me. And every time they cut into what was supposed to be virgin soil, they would find these little tunnels, and they were cut into really dense red clay. They were approximately 2 feet across, square cut, but always with an arched top. And as you know, structurally, that makes a tunnel stronger. So they were finding these all over the place. Um, an
Were they in
interesting
current use?
the not there. No, nothing's in current use at that university now. There are still little people in very remote areas, but not at the university, where there must have been a city at one underground little city at one time,
I mean,
because these were
one of the
found
people who spoke
everywhere.
at my conference has spoken all about this in Great Britain. Deborah Hatzfeld, and she has a whole record of all this and Bigfoot and Sasquatch being seen in British Isles. So I'm fascinated. So go and please illuminate me about this, please.
You want me to continue on with the little people?
Yes, the little people, the Sasquatch, all of that.
All right. I found it very interesting that one of the professors had a small skull on his desk. It was sort of like a conversation starter, paperweight kind of thing. And one day, not elementary, high school teacher came in and picked up this skull and looked at it real closely. She said, "This is not a child's skull. It has all its wisdom teeth." And one of the men that I did get to talk to, um, he had run the bulldozer and had turned up this small skeleton. Um, and the skull ended up on this professor's desk, and the rest of it ended up on, I believe, his home mantle. And I can't imagine a wife wanting to have a skeleton on her mantle, but that's where the rest of the skeleton ended up. Um,
But this is
let me
speechless.
tie
I mean, this
let me
stuff
let
should
me
be,
tie this
yeah.
let me tie this back to Britain. The Cherokee didn't like one type of little people that once lived in this area, and they were described as having red whiskers. All right. The Cherokee little people probably don't even have beards. But anyhow, the Cherokee, the big people, would try to kill the red whiskered ones. They didn't like them. I do not know why. I never could find out a reason for it, but they didn't like them. And the closest I can come to them being killed is some of the moonshiners had found a whole pile of what they call little people bones when they were making their still in the mountains. So that was kind of indirect confirmation of this. But even better, there was a man who obviously was a grown man when I talked to him, but when he was 5 years old, he was here when there was a major flood. I mean, a significant flood, and that was in 1940. Tons of earth was flushed away, and he found this little oval, like a medallion, um, in this from this deep part of the earth, and it had a face on it on both sides, and it looks like a leprechaun's face. And in my book, I have a picture of a leprechaun's profile along with the picture of this oval. and you can see the similarities, the pointed ears, the nose, the everything. So that just gives you a whole lot to think about.
Well, there's a brilliant researcher here in Wiltshire, only up the road from here, called Maria Wheatley, and she's been on with Richard Hoagland, and she's been on a lot of the Gaia TV shows, and she's written a new book about Stonehenge, which is not too far away from here, about the long-skulled people of Stonehenge and the whole intricate queen, a queen of Avery. Again, these are an indigenous different species. Apparently, came right across from Siberia, and they were wiped out by the bigger skull people. So similar story there, tied up with the history of Stonehenge. So this is fascinating.
That's why I wrote the book. Everybody that I talked to was an old timer. I think most of them were in their 80s when I interviewed them. And the original man, um, he was the one that opened the door for me to, or the doors for these other people who had been involved in construction. If I had just knocked on their door, they never would have talked to me. But because of him, I spent quite a few Saturdays around kitchen tables interviewing these men, and I realized that nobody had preserved this information, not a soul. And so I deliberately saved it because nobody else was doing it. And originally, I just sent the information to the local museum and the university. Later, I got a whole lot of photos and maps and different other stories and turned it into a book. And again, the title of that is Cherokee Little People Were Real. And I tell all of these stories.
Have you been in touch with Hugh Newman or Ancient Aliens or anything like that? I mean, this is stuff that should be on the Discovery Channel or something. Have you had a sort
The
of a helpful but not helpful response from those kind of authorities?
the most exposure I've gotten is, and this is not real recent. I've been on Coast to Coast. I think it's 6 times, and I was part of a documentary that the Travel Channel did. Everything else has been much lower level key. Lots of podcast things, things of that nature.
Well, I've been on the Travel Channel, so
I know. I saw you.
you did. Oh
I
my
did.
God,
You were
I've never
talking.
seen it.
You were talking about crop circles.
Yes, that's a consciousness experiment. It's a bit of a psyop. Nothing going on
I didn't
here.
see the whole thing. I was flipping stations and I caught you. So I watched it from then on. I did not see it from the very beginning.
My God. But so continue because there seem to be where these ancient sites are. I mean, there's lots of megaliths around here and strange stones and stories about different people not from around here. So where those bases that you're talking about are being built seem to be, there's no coincidence that those bases you're talking about are there in the first place.
Again, I really have made the conclusion that the caves make it very, very easy for Bigfoot, little people, and underground base builders to exist. I
So
think
have
that's a
you got
common.
further accounts of the Bigfoot? And you call them Bigfoot rather than
We call
Sasquatch.
Sasquatch is a name that a professor, or not a professor, a teacher who worked on an Indian reservation, uh, I don't know, in the early 1900s, he came up with the name Sasquatch, kind of based on a word that the Indians in that area used.
Well, you
So
have a
that
region of Canada called Saskatchewan, so
I
that,
don't know. It's an interesting thought.
maybe it's a name for other people.
No, it definitely is the larger people. That definitely is the case, at least from everything I have read and known. So, and we have the Bigfoot, which is incredible. If the Bigfoot can remain unseen by most people, it's got to be a snap for the little people to stay out of sight.
Well, I've interviewed Kiwani Lapseritis. Again, that was at the UFO Congress when it was in Scottsdale. I mean, this is a fascinating subject. I'm really do continue talking about all that. I mean, everything you talk about is amazing.
You want to hear about the Bigfoot?
I want to hear everything. We have
I don't
time.
know if I have. I don't know. I have
Well,
time for him.
whatever length of time you've got, let's talk about it, and maybe we can do something later.
Okay,
This is the time to
so
get it on the record.
So you want to jump to Bigfoot now?
I want to follow what I want to explore each region and then keep moving on. You
Well,
mentioned Bigfoot, so I like to.
let's stick with the little people and let's get a
Yeah.
little bit more human interest in this because
Yes.
some of the stories I thought were really kind of amusing. And once the Indians or the native Cherokee here would trust me, I would hear these great stories, and these did not come easily. There was a waitress at a restaurant I at one time went to quite frequently. I kind of became friends with her. She knew what I was doing with the Cherokee Little People, the research, and she was able to convince a fellow worker who was a woman about in her late 20s who was Cherokee. And because of that waitress, I was able to get some really cute stories. And one of the stories that the young woman told me was that she and her family have a small trailer up in an area called Big Cove, which is at a high elevation on the Cherokee Indian Reservation. And they use that when they have their family gatherings. So they have a place for a restroom and a kitchen. And so the family was gathered on one occasion, and this at that time the young woman was a child, and all the kids were playing hide and seek. She decided to go hide in the shower in the little trailer. When she pulled back the curtain, there was one of these Cherokee little men just grinning as big as could be. Of course, it startled her completely, and she went running to her daddy, but everybody knew what they were. It's just that if your own mother was suddenly behind the shower curtain, it would startle you. So I thought that was interesting. Another story was a young Indian woman went to visit her aunt and uncle who live in an area called Snowbird, and it is more remote than the Cherokee Indian Reservation. There are also more full-blooded Indians in Snowbird than there are on the reservation. And she apparently there was a conversation about the little people, and her uncle said, "I'll prove it to you." And what he did was he took, before they went to bed that night, he put flour out all over the front deck or front porch. And when they got up in the morning, there were these little footprints on the porch. Clearly were not, orchestrated by somebody else. It is kind of a tradition among the older Cherokee around here to put food out for the little people. And if they forget to put it out, sometimes the little people will throw stones on the roof to remind them that, hey, where's the food? Where's the food? So there is still cooperation with the Cherokee and the little people.
The little people probably know more about us than we know about them.
That's possible. And I actually got to, well, I got some stuff on camera. There is a couple who live just a couple ridges away from me, and they have a game camera out in front of their driveway. And one day a bird flew in front of it and triggered the camera, but it caught a little person back in the woods, um, who it was August, and the person was not dressed except for like maybe a loincloth and had the long, straight black hair that you would associate with the Indians. Um, at first, the couple wondered if they were just seeing a spirit or if it was real. When they brought the film to me, I put it on my computer and I turned up the contrast on the computer. Anything that's alive will go to magenta. A ghost will not turn, it will just stay white. I found some really good ghost pictures. My favorite one was a ghost on his hands and knees playing with a very alive child on the floor. And when I turned up the magenta, the child or the baby, young child, went to magenta. The ghost stayed white. When I did this with this picture they'd caught on the game camera, it went to magenta. So it clearly was a live little creature, not a spirit. Um, then on another occasion, again, another Cherokee who'd gotten to know me over a number of years, she said that her granddaughter was a little person. I'm going, how can that be? And there has been some interbreeding in the past between the little people and the full-blown Cherokee. someplace in my archives, I have a picture of a full-grown woman Cherokee with her husband, who is noticeably small. I mean, noticeably smaller than she is. And it was a wedding announcement in one of the Cherokee papers from a bunch of years ago. So there has been interbreeding at some point. Anyhow, she brought in her granddaughter, who was a teenager, for me to meet. And the she was about 3.5 feet tall. She was wearing pink glasses. Her grandmother explained to me that the light always bothered her, and so she always wore sunglasses. Makes you wonder, because the little people live underground for the most part. Maybe the light does bother them.
Well,
Um,
UV and the kind of lights that they can almost see in the dark,
right,
or would see in what we would call the dark.
yeah, I don't know that for a fact, but it does make you wonder.
I've had a little bit of experience of that in Ireland when I walked into a very crowded store, and I couldn't see a bloody thing. And the guy was very. What do you mean you can't see on this? But that's just me because we're used to very high brightness
Right.
things. So keep going. And this is fascinating.
Um, I wanted to publish this book, not book, the story, and put it on my website. I had to promise not to. I can talk about it as long as I don't identify the people. The parents of this young
Whatever's right
little,
by you, Mary.
the parents of this little person didn't want it to be known that she was different than everybody else. She clearly was. Uh, she was taken to a doctor, a specialist, and the doctor couldn't figure out why she was so different in different ways. Uh, if I were in charge of the world, I would have had a major investigation at that point, but they wouldn't even tell the doctor what they knew about the child's origin. Not only was the child from the Cherokee line, but the child's father was from Hawaii, and Hawaii, they have the little people also. So
Is there?
we may have recessive genes that found each other.
Um, did you have you? There was a guy called Lloyd Pye. I think. Did you?
And he had the little skull, and he died of cancer rather suddenly.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, we
it,
managed to interview him here in England, and he managed to get DNA, which proved he managed to get long. Uh, it was very difficult to get dry bone DNA, and he managed to get data from a team of scientists who were just starting out. They didn't have reputations to lose, and he managed to
right.
prove that this was a mix of DNA using in vitro fertilization.
The I did a story about him years ago. Um, the way that his cancer came on so suddenly makes me just slightly
They
suspicious.
they 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 took him out.
Yeah,
That's what they
there's
do.
no way I can prove it, but it kind of
Well,
feels like that.
we ran a project here called the Amash Project, and we interviewed him at a wonderful lady's house in North London, and it was a very nice interview. And days later, he was to fly back to the States where he was to pass away. But it was tragic that the skeleton that they had, the nurse found, it was a mix. The only way that this child could have been made was that it had a human egg with different DNA in the egg so that it could be born of a human mother. And that takes technology.
Absolutely.
And that's
And
very old.
it's the same thing with the Bigfoot. The if you get a hair sample, for example, if you just test the hair, it will always come out as human. In order to find that what makes the Bigfoot unique is only found in the nuclear DNA. So if you can't get to the follicle, if you can't get to the nuclear DNA, you can't prove that it's something other than human. But because that's where the difference is, it's on the paternal side or the father's side.
Now, could you explain the difference between that father and mother side? Is where it's are you on top of that type of
I don't know if I
technology?
can explain it too well at all. The hair itself is just part of the regular DNA. But what makes the Bigfoot special only comes from the paternal side. The paternal side of the DNA can only be found in the nuclear DNA. And other than that, I don't know how to explain it any better.
But there is DNA. It is physical evidence that
Yes,
these have been
right,
analyzed.
right.
Do you want to talk about that side of your information?
All I can tell you is that, let's see, what's her name? I'm going to go blank. Anyhow, I can give you the name of the Melba. She's a veterinarian, and she had done all sorts of research on this. She was made fun of Ketchum. I think it's Melba Ketchum. And she had done the initial DNA analysis of the Bigfoot. She's the one that, certainly could explain this better than I can. She was made fun of. I mean, they just absolutely demoralized her. But later on, there were at least 4 or 5 major scientists who did confirm what she had originally put out there for the world to know.
I think the
So,
initial response to this is, I mean, we did a documentary way back in 2012, and they switched it. Was getting too serious, and they decided to switch it into a mockumentary and sort of
mm,
put little silly music. You can get that on Netflix. It was Confessions of an Alien Abductee, but that still gets the information out into the public domain.
gotcha. It's hard to wade through all this stuff to find out where the truth is anymore because there's so much, there are so
Well,
many people trying to mess
what
it
I want
up.
to hear is your accounts and your information. This is fascinating. I think you're
Uh,
fantastic. I really.
like I said, I really wanted to save the Bigfoot information before all these people died. And I had a moonshiner taking me back in the woods where this old moonshine still had once been. We were hoping we could find the pile of bones. The man, I think, was 89, just about 90, had lost much of his vision. So he and his very elderly wife and myself are out there trying to find where this pile of little people bones originally was. But he knew about it. He was a moonshiner at that time, back
I'm sure the
when those.
moonshine had no effect on his sight whatsoever.
That does make it suspicious, but nevertheless, I have every reason to believe he was telling me the truth. And by the time somebody's 89 years old, um, they really want to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And by the way, back in the 30s, that was moonshining was about the only way some of these people could even survive. So it wasn't just because they love liquor.
Well, we had a similar situation in Ireland, which I've just forgotten the name. It took me to get a flight to Canada to take my, oh God, it's called a potchine. Potchine. That was the equivalent. There was some nice TV programs made about that, about the BBC. Bit of a comedy routine, but it was anyway. So continuing
Now
on with these
I
stories.
will jump to the Bigfoot. Um, I'll give you some of my firsthand experiences. Um, One of the men who lives at the top of one of these ridges, his family's lived up there forever. And he said there was a Bigfoot cave on his property and he would take me to see it. And so we go up this mountain road, dirt road, single lane, and we get out, and he immediately gets um, what do you call it? A sickle, to cut things down with. I'm going, oh my goodness, what am I getting into? He had it because he thought part of the path to get there might need to be cleared. So that was the reason for the sickle. As very shortly after we got out of the car and started walking into the woods, we heard this sound that sounded like a bird, but not quite a bird. And right where we heard that, we saw big footprints going up a very steep hill to
Uh,
the
What
left
sort
of
of
our
sound
path.
was it like? Like the bird sound?
It's like I don't think I can imitate it, but it's like a bird, but it also has almost a mechanical sound to it. It's not like a bird I've
Because
ever
in
heard.
La Gomera, which is the Canary Islands, La Gomera's ancient language is like birdsong.
Hmm.
We do a
Anyhow,
giant
that's
snare.
not
Yeah.
that's not how they communicate,
But
except
I'm thinking
for
of it.
call.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't help you with that. I'm sorry. But anyhow, in the direction we were headed, where the cave was supposed to be, there was like an answer with this same bird-like call. And then everything got quiet. My conclusion was one Bigfoot was warning the other Bigfoot that these humans were headed in their direction. That was how I interpreted that, especially since there were footprints right where we had were when we first heard it. When I got there, there was a cave that was, oh, I think it was like 8 feet across and 5 feet high, so deep I could not see the back of it. I took pictures of it. It's in my book about the Bigfoot. But I was too chicken to go in the cave. Not only might I run into a Bigfoot who didn't want me there, but there's also forms of mountain lions and bears and all sorts of things in the area. So I had no weapon and no courage, apparently.
Well, what size are these guys? Big guys. What size of feet? Tell us more.
All the footprints that I have seen in this particular area, which is outside of Cashiers, North Carolina. Cashiers, North Carolina is like a village at the top of one of the mountains here. And every time we've measured them, they've been about 16 inches long as far as the foot goes. So that, for some reason, seems to be pretty consistent around here. But there's also juvenile Bigfoot that will leave smaller
It's
prints.
about that size.
16 inches.
So that's about a foot. That's
No, it's
yeah,
a foot plus 4 inches.
yeah. That's about a foot, isn't it? It's big factor. Big. Okay.
Okay. So,
I've got big
uh,
feet. I've got size 14. So anyway,
well, you might fit right in.
that's UK size 14, 13.
Okay.
Anyway,
Anyhow, and the most eventful Bigfoot story um, occurred again at one of these mountain peaks, not too far from Cashers. And there's first a gravel road, and then you take a side road that's single lane that follows a creek between two mountain ridges. And you go about a mile down this road, and then there's suddenly this like a bowl-shaped valley that opens up. In that little valley, there is a pond, a barn, a big house, and a little house. And the woman who lived on the land, we just call her Samantha, she and her children lived in the little house. Her parents lived in the big house, but had moved out recently. And they started having all sorts of damage done around with their cars. Um, they had damage with the house being broken into. There were muddy handprints all over the door, also muddy footprints where they tried to kick in the door. There were foot handprints around the dryer. She had gone to town one day, left the dryer running, and you could clearly see that the Bigfoot were trying to figure out what was swirling inside that little window of the white box. Um, they began to have so much happen that she moved out of the little house and into the big house where her parents had lived. The damage and the stuff continued to happen there. And for some reason, it sticks in my mind that the Bigfoot tore up the toilet and they broke the top of the tank on the back of the toilet. They had taken the toothpaste and squirted it all over. They had just, torn things up. Even though the mother and her children eventually moved out of that property completely, the daughter, who was, I think, late teens, kept her door locked because she didn't want the Bigfoot in there, even if they weren't there. And I have pictures or a picture of claw marks, absolutely deep claw marks, where obviously the Bigfoot had put their hand under the space at the bottom of the door and tried to pull it open this way. And the gouging is really quite deep. So they had reason to be afraid. Um, we found out later why the Bigfoot were so upset because they had lived there for a very long time and never caused any trouble. Somebody had been working on the dam that dammed up the creek that created the pond, and the jackhammer went right down, and all the water suddenly disappeared. It went into the cave that the Bigfoot lived in,
all right.
and they were pissed.
Yeah.
And that's also why everything they touched was muddy. It was just their hands, every place they went, it was mud. And we took a woman out there who had the ability, stronger than most of us, to be able to communicate. And she let the Bigfoot know that that was not intentional. They did not mean to do that, and like
That's
apologize.
really important.
And then after that, and they didn't, I was there when it was discovered. There was this little piece of burlap or something like burlap, and there were some shiny things in it that were left at the front door. We don't know how long it was there because everybody entered the house from the back. But while we're sitting on the front porch, we look over and there it is. It apparently was a peace offering because after that we had no more trouble with the Bigfoot.
Did they try to repair the lake or what, or whatever was wrong? That the
I don't know what happened to the pond after that. I just know that the woman moved out of that both houses, and she would return on a regular basis, almost daily. She would always take a bodyguard with her who had a gun, just so she could check on the property. But the fact she had a bodyguard with a gun shows you the extent of the concern and the fear that they had. Um, Another interesting thing is, again, I mentioned that they have, you know, little people, I mean, little Bigfoot, also children. And clearly the children got into the house also because they were in one of the bedrooms and they took a marker and they were scribbling all over the wall. And it's down below the light switch. These scribbles and drawings or whatever were too low to have been done by a full-grown Bigfoot. So we kind of assumed it was the Bigfoot children that were doing that.
so basically not much difference between human children and Bigfoot children. Then, well,
In
I'm
the
talking
book,
about scribbling and all that.
right. And in my book, let's see if I remember the name of it, Bigfoot Beyond the Footprints. And that's all about the discoveries that we've made with the Bigfoot here in North Carolina. Again, I only write books if nobody else seems to be covering the subject. And again, this is one of
Well,
those that nobody else had written about. So that's why I did that book.
well, let's talk about all of those books and things. This is really, really fascinating.
Wow.
I mean, there is a lady here called Deborah Hatswell, and I think it's called Deborah Hatswell. She's had loads of stories of sightings and stuff, but again, it's not getting really into the written public domain, and that's so important.
The Let's see, what can I tell you? We did a lot of experiments, and I need to give somebody else credit. Her name is Glennis Heenan. She once lived in uh, the Cashers area. She doesn't live there now. And she conducted some experiments for us. And we did things like put out different kinds of food to see what the Bigfoot liked. The conclusion was they're mostly like human children. They prefer the apples and the fruit, and the nuts. When we put something out like asparagus, they spit it out. That sounds just like a human kid. We also experimented with the containers that we put things in. And the first thing we did was get one of those coolers that you would carry a six-pack in and put some different food in it, left the lid cockeyed so they could see what was inside. They tipped it over and took what was in there. We put a basket out there with a handle. Same thing. They tipped it over and took the food. When we put a basket out there without a handle, they picked it up and took the whole thing. And after the food was gone, we found the basket down the road. My conclusion on that one, or my suspicion on that one, is that they had encountered a trap of some sort and they weren't going to get their hand stuck in it.
Ah, that's right. Yes, yeah,
So,
that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, there's logic to it completely. And normally, by the way, the Bigfoot seem to be in family structures. Um, Another man who had been let's see, a deputy sheriff in Florida. He got cancer. He moved to the mountains just to get healthy. He had an organic garden in his mountain property just so he could eat well and eat healthy. Um, his home was off an old logging road. So there's mountains and woods all around him. One day he heard it sounded like children playing in the stream, but there's no children anywhere around where he lives. So that got him suspicious. And one night he was out, I assume, on his front deck or porch, and he had a light by where he parked his car. And he saw a family go by. It was mama, papa, and like two teenagers. So the man eventually became friends with the male Bigfoot, who would come down to the garden whenever the guy was working in his garden, and they communicated telepathically.
Ah, right.
And they
I was
got
wondering
real
how you
friendly,
communicated.
and the man called named him Fred because he was friendly. The other base that's recently been under construction is near Chimney Rock State Park, and it's at the top of a mountain called Sugarloaf Mountain. I was there, I believe it, yeah, in 2010, and I went up this long, winding, and you have a picture of it that I sent you,
Yeah.
uh, curving road. Um, that's at the top of Sugarloaf. And that looks, the shape of that whole structure at the top of the mountain looks like a nuclear silo. Officially, the top of the mountain is let's see, FAA facility, which is, um, I go blank on what the letters stand for, but Federal
Federal
Aviation,
Aviation Authority. It might be an
right.
antenna, a ring antenna.
Except this goes below ground. And one of the people who lives at the top of that mountain, there's only 8 homes, at least at that time, near the top of this. And um, she jumped the fence, she and her husband, uh, to check it out. And they found tire tracks that went right up to a wall. And then, I mean, I'm just, flat on. And then, it was like it must have opened at one point because if you're
Yes,
driving a
we've had a
vehicle,
situation like that in Ireland
you
where
can't
where trucks.
you can't drive the tire right up to the wall
Yes,
because front of it will get in the way.
that's some kind of shield. We've had a base built in Ireland. There's a researcher there. Heavy tire tracks, wide, deep truck tracks going straight in, and then nothing, nothing happening
Right.
here.
Right. And the woman who, again, I had known in another circumstance. So I'm really, really glad I trusted these people and they trusted me before these things happened because then, they're not hesitant to talk to you. And she has seen, her name is Rebecca. She has seen lots of stuff from her home, which again is in walking distance of the gate to this facility at the top of the mountain. One night there was all sorts of helicopter activity above the mountains. There was heavy earth moving equipment that was dropped on the top of the mountain. The next day, she and her husband jumped the fence to because everything had cleared out, and everything had been covered in brand new sod. So clearly, something had been majorly changed at the top of the mountain. She had noticed that vehicles would come up on a regular basis with 3 people in them and then go back down the road with 3 different people in them. And that there seemed to be a change of, I don't know, of staff for this facility every 3 days. And she saw this repeatedly over quite a bit of time. So, between that and also UFOs again showing up over this facility. So we have UFOs that we're seeing over the Perry facility. We've seen UFOs over the Smoky Mountain facility. Um, let's see, Perry. In most of them, there are UFOs in somehow tied together with these facilities.
Any different accounts of the UFOs, different types, or any data on that?
Well, the most common one that she saw was like saucer shape, where it's a little bit rounded on the top and the bottom, and then this kind of a shape. But one day, she and her husband were going into town, and they saw one that was just, I don't know, it seems like it was just a couple feet wide. It had antennae sticking out of it, and it was along the side of this dirt road. And you need to show the road so they see how remote it really is going up to this mountain. And uh, it it there it is. Now I took this picture from the road, so this is a hairpin. I'm up higher taking a picture of part of the road that I had just been on. So that gives you an idea
So
of
that's the
how.
hairpin of that.
No,
No, it's
it
just
isn't. That is the road getting up to the top of that. The top of the mountain is fenced off. The top of the mountain officially is the FAA facility. The top of the mountain is where all this action takes place. But this woman lives within, easy walk from there. So she and her husband had seen quite a bit of activity that you normally wouldn't see. And
There's that picture.
Sugarloaf, that is Chimney Rock and Chimney Rock State Park. I'm told that the park has expanded between there and the Sugarloaf Mountain, most likely to keep development from happening close to that facility. By the way, there's a real connection with the public land or the public parks and these facilities. We have one under Mount Mitchell, which is the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi, and it's a place where tourists go. We have this one at Chimney Rock. We have the one under the Smoky Mountain National Park. We have one in Lindale Gorge where the Brown Mountain Lights are seen. Um, Anyhow, that's just a quick list.
Brown Mountain Lights. What's that?
It's a phenomena where people see these strange lights that appear in a gorge called Lindale Gorge, and that's been going on. I don't know, maybe for a century. I mean, it goes way, way back. One of the hikers that I talked to, he and his girlfriend were hiking, and they saw a portion of the mountain open up, big enough for like a truck to go through. When they went back to that same location later, you couldn't even tell the
Have you heard of
door.
the Hessdalen lights in Norway?
I have not.
There's a fjord area where these lots of lights are seen coming in and they disappear and move all around. There's a guy called Terry Toftenes, a Norwegian filmmaker, did a whole story on that, and scientists and all sorts of people have gone up there to see that. And then here in Wiltshire we have a thing called Golden Ball Hill, and there's all sorts of stuff that connects with the. But we're not at the same kind of latitude or height of the mountains that you're talking about here
Right.
in Wiltshire.
Right. Um, I will mention that under the Mount Mitchell, again the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi. Um, my witness on that one was taking a group of military people to uh, surveil the area, and they saw a door open also, big enough for vehicles to go in. But when it's closed, you can't even tell it's there, which is, they perfected the way of hiding these things.
Definitely, I think one way to keep something quiet is not to put huge fences and guard posts and searchlights all around it. That just
Right,
attracts attention. And I think we've
right,
we've had that kind of technique here in England, where the forest is between the M3 and M4. There's two westerly going motorways or highways leaving London. Uh, you used to be able to walk through the whole forest. It's a lot of coniferous forest along there. Hides an awful lot of things, and you end up going into it, and then suddenly you're just leaving it. There's some kind of technology which gives you literally, you don't actually see. I mean, people remember there's a huge building there, and now you just go in and then you just leave.
right.
It's some kind of deflection or false reality projection of some kind.
So, but this had to, in the Mount Mitchell, it had to have been some kind of mechanical door
Yes,
that was
but then when it
camouflaged.
closes, it's got a.
It,
It's not as if you can see hinges or anything like that.
no, no. It's like it looks like the natural habitat. So that's common. I think that's done a lot out west too. So that's just the way it is. I'm going to jump us back to the Sugarloaf facility. I was originally there in 2010. In 2012 and 2013, everything changed. Now, I showed you that picture, or you showed the picture of that winding road, gravel road, single lane going up to the top of that mountain. There are only, at that time, that's not it.
Oh, it's not that. Yeah. Okay.
That's an aerial view of the actual top of the mountain.
Right. We're talking
That's it.
that.
All right. Now, that's the way it looked when I went up there. Let's see, that's in 2010. In 2012 and 2013, everything changed. And I had three witnesses that were able to tell me how everything had changed. The road had been widened and smoothed out, and they saw 20 electrical trucks going up this road. The electrical trucks installed major power poles, and we're talking huge, like 5 to 6 feet in diameter. They were installing cables going up this road, and I think the cable reels themselves were like 10 or 12 feet um, in diameter. And the cords or the wire themselves were, I think they said about 10 inches in diameter. Now, mind you, there were only 8 houses at the top of the mountain.
That sounds
What
like an
would
underground cable.
so what would well, they had utility poles too that
Yeah.
were, so I do not
It's
know. I
funny
think
they're doing
not,
something similar to that. I mean, we're talking cables, I mean, this size.
they described them as 10 inches in
And that
diameter.
that's a screened underground cable that they're putting in now, replacing the very high towers with very heavy duty, high voltage.
Well, I need to go back and check this place out for myself. It's probably still above ground. It's very hard to put stuff underground when everything's so rocky,
Yes, exactly.
So that may not be the case in this particular
Well, they're digging
situation.
into chalk here. The chalk's only about
Oh
a
yeah,
couple of
Hugh and I
feet
could
below.
dig through
Yeah,
that. So, but the rocks are a little harder.
yeah.
So, anyhow, I thought that was very interesting in a 2 year period, going from this little winding dirt road to something major, and that kind of electrical power, could take care of a major sports stadium.
Well, that's always very interesting. You've got a good eye for detail like that. That's very important. It means that there's something big going on. Something we've noticed here is that the solar panels are all, we've got loads of areas of solar panels, but no high voltage transformers to take the power from the solar panels to put it back into the grid because it's powering something underneath.
Straight down, just like that water tank, the 50,000, or yeah, 50,000 gallon tank in Cherokee. Um, the pipes were going right down into the ground, and the reservoir was dry. So, yep, there's a lot of things going on underground. And I could,
do you want to list your books?
let's see if I can do them right. There's underground military bases hidden in North Carolina mountains, and that's about all these facilities, all five of them that I have found in this part of the country. There's one called Cherokee Little People Were Real, which gets into the little people that are found around this area. There's one called Bigfoot Beyond the Footprints. Again, talks about the Bigfoot stories in this area. The other two probably wouldn't. Well, you might be
List them
interested. There's
in
another one
detail.
called Spy in the Sky. This one, the powers that be have tried to block it from getting publicity. Over quite a number of years, I had found incredible things using Google Earth on Mars, in Antarctica, under the ocean. Um, uh, Also found things around the sun and out in deep space. And it's really what I call a picture book for adults. Um, and it's evidence of these things. And like I said, the powers that be seem to be trying to block that from getting coverage. That's the only book that you can only get by contacting me through my website. And the website is skyshipsovercashers.com. Cashers is spelled like a cashier at the grocery store. And under Editor's Corner, you can find out about each of the books, and all of them you get through Amazon except for that last one, Spy in the Sky. And then I've written another one that seems totally unrelated. It's called Tangible Evidence of Jesus. And this is filled with archaeological evidence of his life and what really happened.
We have a brilliant bookshop here called Devises Books. And there's a lady there, a formidable lady. She is a princess of devices because on Thursday she wears a lovely crown, and she was able to get me books from anywhere in the world. She got me a very rare book from the United States, and within a day, had it.
Wow.
She's very good. So I'll mention those titles to you. She's a formidable lady. Don't mess with Joe of devises
Okay.
books and some wonderful art gallery, Handel House. It's a beautiful, like 15. I'd been there since 300 or 400 years. So
Anyhow, if you want to share that information, again, if you go to skyshipsovercashers.com, click on Editor's Corner, and then you can click on the books, and there's a little summary for each one of the books.
well, I'll take that as a frame grab from your website.
Absolutely. That
Would
makes
you
it easy.
would you be able to come back and talk in detail about those five bases, or in more detail, or
We can certainly arrange something at another time. I just won't be able to do it today because I've
yeah,
got
no,
myself
today it's
hectic.
today's a hello and how you doing type of a thing.
Okay,
And
all
it's great to
righty.
see you after all this time. I really admire your work. You've got no
You're very,
nonsense. You're in there and you're getting the evidence. That's absolutely brilliant.
thank you. You're very kind. And good luck with all your work that you do.
Well, I tell you, they've taken a few pot shots. I'm still around. Well,
That's good.
well,
You take care.
take care and thank you very much. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.